This podcast is brought to you by the Association for Coaching, the world's leading international professional body which is advancing coaching in business and society worldwide. I'm your host, Rob Lawrence, and in this new series we are celebrating 20 years of the Association for Coaching by reflecting upon the journey so far. I meet with founders, coaches, leaders and members who contributed to the AC's journey to learn more about their experiences with coaching as part of our global community. Together we explore the impact that coaching has had on the world so far, what we need to be thinking about for the future to create more positive change whilst tackling some of the world's biggest challenges. Each week, you'll hear how coaches are working and collaborating as a global community together to advance coaching worldwide. Hello and welcome to another episode celebrating 20 years of the Association for Coaching. In today's conversation, we're going to be joined by 3 members from the AC's global community to learn more about what it means to be part of an emerging and truly global coaching community. More specifically, I have with me today 2 regional chairs and 1 member of the Global Advisory Panel. I have with me Sarah Tennyson, regional chair based in the US, Michael Cullen, regional co-chair based in Canada, and Oliver Johnston, inaugural chair for AC Ireland and also a member of the Global Advisory Panel. So today we're going to explore the AC's global presence and community to offer you, our listener, a sense of what it's like to be part of a global coaching community. So before we jump in today, I would invite each of you to provide our listener with a sense of who you are and perhaps where your coaching journey began and how the AC became part of that journey. So may I start with you, Sarah?
Certainly. Thanks very much, Rob, and hello. It's a pleasure to be here with you all today. Similar to the AC, I'm also celebrating 20 years as a practitioner working in this space. My background formally is in organisational psychology, but my practice and career has been spent largely working as an external consultant to organisations very much globally. And as part of my work, I've been a facilitator, a trainer. I've worked with groups, with teams, and then coaching became part of my work as it sort of evolved out of that client experience and has become a larger and larger part of the work that I do. So today I co-own and run a coaching firm and leadership development firm, and we work, and I personally work as an executive coach, a team coach, group coach, facilitator, and also a coach supervisor. So that's sort of a little bit about how I got into coaching. It really evolved out of a lot of the other related work that I was doing, and then became a member of the AC in 2019 when we started the region in the US, and I can talk more about that a bit later, and found very much a sort of a feeling of home among this AC global community here. So I am from the UK, as you can hear from my accent, but been based in the US since 2015, so just over 7.5 years now, enjoying working with the region here.
That's great. I'm sure we'll get into more of that, Sarah, but I'm curious as to how things started over there in the US for you.
So it actually started with myself and Angela Wright as co-chairs. Angela actually had a relationship with Catherine Tulper. That's how it sort of came to be. And both of us felt very much aligned with AC as a professional body because of the AC's philosophy on reflective practice, the importance of supervision that it emphasises through its, accreditation process, but also very much because of the inclusiveness of the AC's approach to building community. So that not only the broadness of the kind of membership offerings and accreditation tracks, but also the openness to lots of different ways that coaches might have trained and been educated in order to become a member of the AC. So we're very much in favour of that inclusion across the community, and we find that reflected in our membership base here in the US. So we started it initially locally in New York, which is where Angela and I were both based. We started out as sort of the East Coast, US East Coast region. Then after a really exciting first year of doing lots of things locally, COVID came along. So we pivoted to running lots of things virtually. And what that's done over the last 2 years or more now is really broadened out the members that we can reach across the whole of the US. So both our committee members and also the members who participate and attend now are very much spread across the whole country. So we're sort of now more of a US region than initially we were. That's how we came to be.
That's wonderful. Thank you for that background, Sarah. And I learned off air just before we started recording that you know Michael. And so I'd like to hand over to you, Michael.
Thank you very much, Rob. I too met Sarah in 2019, so it was a wonderful coincidence. I'd heard about the AC. There was no presence here in North America, so when I heard that Catherine was coming over to New York and the AC chapter was having a meeting that night, I said, you know what, I'm going to hop on a plane. I'm located in Montreal, Canada, and decided to, on a whim, go down and see what this was all about. And as they say, the rest is history. If anybody's ever met Catherine Tulpa, you know that she's a power unto herself. And I think the two of us had a shared philosophy of wanting to contribute more to the whole coaching profession and the whole evolution of coaching as it was going through the world. And that's something that I felt was kind of lacking currently in my own practice. I had switched to coaching after 25 years in film and television, recognizing that mass communication was undergoing profound change. And I also decided that I wanted to transition from a career to a vocation. And that's what got me interested in coaching. And this idea of personal and professional change and transition intrigued me because I was witnessing my own change and transition and being very much interested in different models, theories, and practices. It looked like an ideal partnership to have in this profession. And after graduating from being trained in coaching, I quickly was absorbed into the staff and became a co-facilitator of teaching and training coaches at universities here in Montreal, and currently at the Executive Coaching Certificate Program at the University of Toronto through the Rotman School of Business. Again, this is like Sarah, pivoting to online. Through that, of course, suddenly you are available to a global audience. And I was certainly intrigued by what was going on in Ireland because it seemed to be a very active chapter, and I attended a few events there too to find out what was going on more there and to give us an idea of what perhaps we could be doing here in Canada.
That's lovely. Thanks, Michael. And Oliver, if my notes serve me correctly, you were one of the founding members of the AC and you've got some extensive experience with the AC. So I'm curious as to your background in coaching and with the AC.
Thanks, Rob. Well, I suppose first of all, I'm sort of a lifelong coach. One of my very early stages of my career, I ran a therapeutic community as an alternative to custody for serious and persistent young offenders. Even describing it that way sounds ancient, but it was an alternative to locking kids up. And we used coaching. We didn't know that that's what it was. We knew that there was something about create the space for people to think for themselves, and they will come up with better answers that advice will ever come up with or instruction will ever come up with. I'm now 70. I turned 70 this year. I'm on my second encore career. So I was the Director of Leadership Consulting for Penna PLC in London, retired from that, set up my own coaching practice, which was like coming home to what I'd always done and liked to do. Ran that for 5 years, and then I was in Panama City, of all places, waiting to go onto a platform with 300 people, and we'd been in India and the Philippines and then US, and so we'd been going around the world. And I was standing there waiting, and I thought, when am I going to stop doing this? Because I love it. It's, you know, it's one of the reasons to get up in the morning, is that whole thing of coaching and engaging with people. And I decided really for two reasons. One, I think I was 67 or 68 then, and thought, well, I want to stop before anybody thinks I should stop. I didn't think I was close to that. And also, there's all these other things I want to do in my life, and as long as I'm consumed in this, I'm not able to do those things. So I just decided to retire, but I wasn't completely ready to hang up my boots, as they say. So I founded a small coaching firm called Stepping Out for the Top Team. So we specialise in working with senior leaders who are thinking and planning to leave the the C-suite or the executive suite. So that's what I do now. My link with the AC, and I worked very closely with Catherine Tulpa, and so she invited me to be the founding chair of the association in Ireland, which was 2006, I think, and I did it 2006 to 2009, and then I've been connected through the Global Advisory Panel ever since. But I'm really a bit of a fraud because I'm not active in the AC anymore, because I'm sort of semi-retired and I'm beyond that. But it is one of the things, it's one of the organisations I can genuinely say I love. And I love my time being active in it. So it's very dear to my heart.
Thanks, Oliver. So one of the questions I'd love to ask each of you, and perhaps I'll stay with you, Oliver, and begin with you with this question, is you're based in Belfast in Northern Ireland, and I'd love to give our listener a bit of a sense of what coaching is like from your perspective there today and how it's evolved over the last 20 years.
Okay, I think 20 years ago, we were held carefully in the hands of the work that Tim Galway had done, right at the start. And then in the UK, people like Sir John Whitmore and Miles Downey had really formulated what modern coaching is in the UK and subsequently in Ireland. And I have really stayed with that as what I believe coaching to be, which is, in its purest sense, holding a space open in which someone else can do their very best thinking and not contaminate it with me, right? So, just to be the person who holds it open. And I notice that coaching has gone really in potentially one of two ways. The journey I've gone is really following the idea of less but better. Or as Coco Chanel said, never add, always subtract. So the 20 years of my practice has been going, what's irrelevant? What can we get rid of so I get to the essence of holding the space open for someone? I think, on the other hand, coaching has become more complicated. In the sense that other dimensions have been brought in. I think there's been a move from coaching into team coaching, for example. I think there's lots of different elements of coaching. So like any young movement, it goes in different directions. And I think over time, it will come back together into something where there is a really clear sense of the common view of what we are. Again, back to 20 years ago, it was so important to have the code of ethics. It was so important to start to go, what is this thing we're all privileged to be part of?
Thanks, Oliver. Sarah?
Yeah, and as I was listening to Oliver, I was mindful that I've only been in the US 7.5 years. So I don't feel entirely qualified to comment on a long-term evolution of coaching in this region. I think there are probably others in our listening audience who will have views on that. But what I can say a little bit about is what we are seeing in our members in this region and what coaching is for them. And one of the things that we've got in our US regional membership is coaches who are working in organisational settings, so typically in executive coaching or internal coaching. And we also have a lot of members who are working directly with individual clients, perhaps more holistically looking at personal or wider life-related issues. And their relationship with their client is a direct one, right, with that client. Our membership spans that whole range of different settings for coaching, which means we also have people who've been trained in really different ways, who bring different theoretical orientations to their coaching, different practices, different tools. And one of the things that we consistently hear from our members when they participate in things like the co-coaching forums or things like our group supervision is how much they value the variety of perspectives that they get on coaching as a practice. The other thing that's sort of quite prevalent here in the US in if you go to coaching conferences or look at literature and so forth, is the fact that it's an unregulated professional industry, however you want to label it, which means for many of our members, the importance of having an independent professional body where there is a set, a code of ethics that you subscribe to, where there is a consistency around what competencies are required and so on, is important for people to have that accreditation and to continuously develop themselves in terms of the craft of coaching that they do.
That's lovely. Thank you. And Michael, your experience of how coaching has evolved from your perspective, but also in Canada there.
Yeah, it's we have to bring the elephant into the room here. North America is largely dominated by another coaching accreditation body, the International Coaching Federation. There are three main credentialing bodies in the world. There's International Coaching Federation, Association for Coaching, and EMCC, the European Mentoring and Coaching Council. The Association for Coaching defines coaching as a collaborative, solutions-focused, results-oriented, and systematic process in which the coach facilitates the enhancement of work performance, life experience, self-directed learning, and personal growth of the client. And I would add the ICF's definition, which is by partnering with a client in a thought-provoking and creative process that inspires them to maximize their personal and professional potential. Both organizations have similar core competencies that are evaluated when accrediting individuals. Where I see an overlap like a Venn diagram is that the ICF is very much competency-oriented in terms of credentialing and maintaining those credentials. What appealed to me in my conversation with Catherine at the time was there's so much more to coaching than this. Once you get your credential, it's not enough to just sit on those laurels. If you are, they're in the wrong place. What do you need to do to expand and grow as a coach? And as she explained, it's not the Association of Coaching, it's the Association for Coaching. It's something that's ever evolving, ever growing. And that really appealed to me because I felt there was something lacking. And I wanted to build on that, both from my experience, of course, having studied over 20 different types of coaching and exploring different theories, models, and approaches in a way that would support coaches once they'd got their credential. And that's where I found the Association for Coaching is unbelievably resourceful. Their website is chock-a-block, and the people in the community are just so proactive in furthering and growing the profession and the practice of coaching as a whole. So here in North America, Sarah and I had started off introducing AC. We're chipping away and making progress incrementally, and it's been a wonderful and will continue to be a wonderful journey, no doubt.
That's great. Thanks, Michael. And if I could stay with you, please. You mentioned there sort of chipping away and maintaining progress and in coaching. Mm-hmm. What have been some of the more recent key themes and sort of trends that you've seen in coaching recently? I know Oliver mentioned some of the broader changes that we've seen, but I'm curious as to your region and your experience in terms of what's been cropping up more recently in terms of what seems to be quite hot in coaching right now.
Two things immediately come to mind. One thing that AC was very big on and continues to be big on is coaching supervision. That was only recently recognized by ICF in the last 2 years as a nice to have but not need to have. Both the AC and EMCC do require ongoing supervision. Now, what do we mean by coaching supervision? It's a peer-to-peer activity. It's a collegial discussion about not just doing coaching, but being coaching. So how are you being as a coach? What's coming up for you that's challenging you? Are there some sort of boundaries that are challenging you in the sense of our ethics usually comes up. So for instance, you're coaching somebody and the HR department who contracted with you is now telling you that there's going to be a shift in the company and that this person will likely be shifted out. And suddenly you're faced with an ethical dilemma. Do I adhere to the contractor who hired me, or do I follow the client themselves? The short answer is you stick with the client because that's who you've contracted with. But how do you show up then, knowing that knowledge? Can you be your authentic self? And so these are types of ethical challenges that may come up in coaching supervision, and where we talk those out. We look at the code of ethics. We look at what's at stake here. We look at the well-being of the client and the well-being of the coach and the shifting environment that's going through. So to your point, what I've noticed here is working with the executives in the last couple of months, there's a very much anxiety around a shifting workforce, a sense of independence and less interdependence, a sense of lack of cohesion because of the shifting environment that is putting a lot of pressure on them. They can't forecast like they once did. And so they're dealing with a new environment that's not very controllable. So it's impacting them, it's impacting their staff, their direct reports, and of course, other stakeholders. So it's creating a whole new field of team coaching. So to your point, that's a new development. AC just introduced, Declan Woods did an amazing job coming up with the core competencies for team coaching, which, as you can imagine, requires a different skill set because you're dealing with multiple personalities and multiple systems at that point. And so that's a new activity that's calling coaches to work more collaboratively, so less independently. So we're starting to see pairs of coaches now show up for team coaching and group coaching for that matter. Again, a different skill set required for that too.
There's some great insights there, Michael. Thank you for sharing that with us. And for our listener, in the second episode of this series, you'll hear from Declan talking about team coaching there. Sarah, I don't want to make any assumptions here because of your relative close proximity to Michael and his world there. But I'd love to ask the same question to you too, in terms of sort of recent trends and things that you may have spotted that are starting to emerge in the world of coaching for you.
Yeah, sure. If this was a video broadcast, listeners would have seen me sort of nodding my head to most of what Michael was saying just then. I would definitely say coaching supervision and the team coaching piece, I would absolutely echo are things that we're seeing here in the US as well. I think one of the trends that's been growing over the last few years that we should mention is, of course, the rise of technology. And as, you know, AI and the technology itself evolves, I can only expect that trend will continue, along with all of the really key questions that it raises around ethics, privacy, competence. What are those things good for? Where, in what ways are they helpful and beneficial, and what are the watch outs there? And certainly we've seen in the last year, conferences in this region have always had that as a topic on them more recently. So I think that trend is likely to continue. And we as a professional body probably need to have a point of view on that whole emergence and what that means for coaches. The other thing that we're seeing, certainly building on Michael's point about, workforce trends, we're certainly seeing it in organisational life, but I think we're also seeing it in the lives of coaches who practice with, as I say, sort of an individual private client base is statistically the rise of mental health issues and well-being issues across the population as a result of the huge, vast complexities of what we've been facing, not health, but also socially, politically, geopolitically, climate, and so on as well. All of those forces are really being felt very strongly and are coming up as a big theme for coaches. And of course, I think that's where supervision plays a very important part, because it's a circumstance where coaches themselves are personally affected by all of this in some way, in addition to trying to help and support their clients who are affected in their own ways. And I think that creates quite a different experience for the coach than what you might experience when you are helping a client with their issues, but you're not actually personally experiencing the same thing in this climate we are. So that's definitely been a theme that we've seen in supervision, as well as among in my own practice, among my organisational clients. That's been a big theme that I think will continue.
That's wonderful. Thank you for adding to Michael's response there. How about you, Oliver, across the Atlantic? Are you seeing similar trends? What would you add to what Sarah and Michael are seeing?
Yeah, again, my head has been nodding through both of the contributions. Some things that reinforce that and maybe add to it. I go back a very long way in coaching in the world of business and work. And it really was the case 15 years ago that coaching was a remedial activity, or thought to be a remedial activity. So you got to coach if you weren't doing well. And how much that has changed to smart people have coaches for all the reasons of what's going on. And it seems so long ago, but I remember at one point Tiger Woods, when he was at the top of his game as a golfer, said, "I always have a coach because I can't see myself swing the golf club." And it really helped for people to go, all right, this is an activity that is for people who are really good at what they do and get better. So I think that has been a major change from there. I think obviously in terms of COVID and lockdowns, the whole nature of conducting coaching through Zoom and Teams, and that's actually my experience of it has been it has worked exceptionally well. It works exceptionally well, but I think there's a new skill set that goes with that to go, how do you make this intimate activity work well that way? I think in terms of types of coaching, I think certainly I've seen the rise of leader as coach, where it's adding the skill set of coaching to a leader's toolkit. Not that they want to become professional coaches, some of them do, but it's that adding that. And because I've tended to work internationally through my career, every time, I remember when I first started to work in Russia, and the people who were commissioning it in Russia said, "No, it's going to be different here because the Russian culture is very different," and coaching skills were exactly the same in imparting them and people getting them. The same when I was in Israel, the same when I was in Africa, the same as whatever. So I think we are very fortunate in coaching to have a universal, when we get to the purest version of it, we have something that is universal and applicable to everybody, and that leaders can pick it up very usefully, especially in the context where levels of agility are so much more now and increasing. The whole idea of the new normal now being just the next normal, because every time you get a new normal, there's another one coming in, whatever. And that we are one of the capabilities that fit into the world as it emerges, and we have an easy fit into that because we're not trying to control it. We're trying to facilitate people's ability to be able to do what they need to do. And the final one just for me is team coaching. And I have been a quite loud critic of team coaching because people kept talking about it, and I'd say, well, that's great, but what is it? Could you please tell me what it is and how it differentiates itself from team building, team working, all the other things that we've done? I'm glad to say that with the work, for example, that Declan has done and the work of people like Georgina Woodster and other, there is to me now a really clear sense of this is different and it's specific and it's unique. So I'm delighted to see that coming through.
Yeah, I just wanted to build on that. From 2019 to 2021, I was teaching and training coaches largely in India and Southeast Asia, Singapore, Australia, etc., where the interest has grown exponentially. And the amount of coaches now coming through and companies embracing it wholeheartedly, recognizing that managers and HR just cannot handle all the onboarding or all the issues that come up with promotion or ongoing issues with team conflict, etc., has required a new approach. And having recognized for years the effectiveness of executive coaching, it's now trickling down to all departments and recognizing the value of engagement, which of course we've seen with the Great Resignation and now lots of ghosting, etc. These executives are at their wits' end trying to retain a workforce. So there is a growing need, and there is a growing market for that is being fulfilled. I've seen the rise of coaching in Africa, to Oliver's point too. There's another credentialing body called Commensa, the Coaches and Mentoring Association of South Africa. And it's wonderful to see them embracing coaching supervision and all the other aspects of coaching. So we're seeing a global approach, acceptance of coaching, and in fact, embracing, I would say, is the word. And to that point, AC has a wonderful quarterly publication called Coaching Perspectives, where they tackle these types of themes. And so one of the ways that I wanted to reach an audience here in Canada, and then realized, why just stick with Canada? Let's make it global, is let's have a quarterly Coaching Perspectives forum, where people from all around the world, wherever you are, if you want to tune in, we can discuss whatever theme the magazine is putting forth that quarter, how it resonates with you, and what's coming up for you as a coach. And these are only 45-minute sessions because we recognize everybody's time is so valuable. And a lot of these types of forums perhaps are a little too long for them to listen completely. So that's another way of reaching that global audience that's hungry now for coaching.
Thanks for that, Michael. Just sticking with you for a moment there, one of the questions I wanted to ask each of you is about, in relation to those trends that we're seeing now, what are some of the challenges that we're faced now today in coaching with those trends? So Michael, what do you feel we need to be thinking about, given some of those challenges that you've mentioned there, but also that enthusiasm for coaching that you're seeing too?
Some of it comes down to money, of course. Coaching is available as part of a corporate training budget, so I see trends in that. My co-chair, Jen Kidby, has successfully run leader coach programs in Grant Thornton, which is a global operation, and we're starting to see more interest in these types of activities. With inflation now rearing up, price points become an issue. So there may be some factors that have yet to trickle through the system. But overall, I think what we're seeing is that, again, the sponsors or the corporations that hire coaches quickly recognize the value. The return on investment is exactly that, employee engagement, inspiring them to maximize their personal and professional potential. It's not telling them what to do. It's not guiding them. It's having them take on more responsibility, more self-accountability and self-direction. And that's something that I noticed in India, where performance evaluations were bottom-up. And reverse mentoring is also something that's been around for the last few years. Anybody who has a 12-year-old or a 15-year-old niece or nephew will know that they're much more proficient at using new technology than I ever will be. So we're becoming more reliant on a younger workforce, and they too are more open to coaching. They want to have that experience of developing in a safe, confidential area. And certainly that's coming up with a lot of the executive coaches I'm working with now. I say, what worked well today in our coaching session? And the number one response I get 9 times out of 10 is just taking time to talk it over with someone and to vocalize it, externalize it. I'm tired of running it around in my head. I'm tired of not having other people not have time for me, or me running after time. The fact that you're sitting there with me, partnering in a non-judgmental way, allows me to express myself in a way that I can rearrange those thoughts and my orientation with your guidance and help just by your skills of coaching, which are to ask largely reflective, open-ended questions and occasional perspectives for them to consider as an invitation, not as a direction.
Some wonderful thoughts there for all of us to give some further consideration to. Sarah, I'd love to come back to you. And you mentioned the rise of technology, as did Michael there, that being part of perhaps the challenges that we're facing today in coaching and going forward in the future indeed. What would you add to that in terms of some of the challenges that you see that we're having to think about tackling going forward from a coaching community perspective?
And I think just to sort of caveat this, where my mind had gone was not specifically related to technology. So here's where my mind went anyway, in terms of challenges, is I think, and where I think AC is part of the solution actually, is in creating community for people who are practicing coaches. So there's both an appeal for people who are very experienced in this field, who've done this work for many years, who are still looking for both the intellectual stimulation and constant learning, but they are also really looking for people to connect with. And I echo very much what Michael was saying earlier about beyond the competencies, but more broadly reflective practice and learning from each other around it. But that sense of most coaches are working alone most of the time. And so the sense of belonging, the sense of community, and the normalization that you get from meeting other coaches and realizing, oh, I'm not alone with this particular challenge or experience is very, very important and valuable. Equally, we see this in newer qualified or newly trained coaches who are just trying to start their own business typically, or practice it within their organization, that they too are looking for a community of others to learn from, to share with, and again to know that they're not alone in that. So I think that is where AC is part of a solution to what is a challenge across the board of working remotely or working hybrid or being spread out and so on. So that was one challenge that my mind went to.
Yeah, I see a parallel process that just came up to me. This idea of competency, capacity, and capability. These are the three things that often come up in coaching supervision too. A coach is either experiencing a sense of overwhelm or underwhelm, perhaps, with their clients, and what needs to be addressed there. Are they capable? What is it that they are perhaps not seeing if they are not successful, quote unquote, with their clients? What needs to be adjusted going forward? The same thing with working with executives, etc., is their capacity is at an all-time high. They're burning out, and their sense of capability is starting to slide, even though they're highly competent. And so what we're seeing now is a high pressure point of social and emotional intelligence coming to the fore versus systems and operational type awareness and intelligence. And to that point, I think this is one of the reasons that the University of Toronto, for instance, brought in a coaching program, or created one, I should say, and why other universities are now getting more and more involved. Certainly here in Canada, more business schools, etc., are recognizing the importance of bringing in all these elements of coaching to their executives, either through MBA programs or EMBA programs, that addresses beyond business skills, the social skills, the relational aspects that are so important now in creating a healthy and dynamic environment for both executives and the workforce and stakeholders at large, quite frankly.
Thanks, Michael. That's great. Oliver, I'd like to bring you back into the conversation there and gain more of your perspective in terms of what we're talking about. And what do you think we need to be thinking about in the context of some of these challenges? Are there other challenges that you see that we haven't mentioned yet? But with what Michael and Sarah have brought forward, what do you feel we need to be thinking about?
I think there might be three areas of challenge, or three lenses to look at that might be worth looking at. I think the first one is, as Sarah, you mentioned, we're a young profession or movement or whatever it is we see ourselves as. And I think the credibility of coaching is being called into view, and it's why accreditation is so important, is that many organisations open their doors to coaching as a good thing. And anybody and everybody has walked through the door with all sorts of ideas, qualifications, and whatever else. And organisations increasingly, it's been happening for quite a while, are increasingly going, we've got to control this. We've got to get the quality aspects of this sorted out. So we need things like, so somebody can say, yes, I'm a trained coach. I went on a 2-day how to hug trees version of coaching, and I'm now a qualified coach. Accreditation as through the AC is much different to that. It actually does seek to get at, can you actually do this job against a set of ethics and competencies? So I think we should be encouraging organisations to do that and say, get tougher, get clearer. Don't let anybody through your doors unless you can be sure that they are going to do the job, that it needs to be done in the way it needs to be done. So I think that's the first one. I think in relation to technology, I think I have a desire to engage with and support tech-assisted coaching. So how can AI play into coaching? How can technology play into whatever? But I also have this great fear that it could be a road to cheapening what coaching is. and making it less precious and less valuable. And therefore, I think it's worth watching the trends and developments of that, not as someone who wants to stop it happening, but someone who wants to make sure that the technical assistance that can be provided into coaching is actually aiding this thing that we all hold so precious. I had an interesting conversation with Nancy Klein. I'm not sure people listening to this may be well about. She's and her thing about time to think. We had a conversation about, in a program where she was bringing people to learn coaching skills in the time to think way, is should we ask people to switch off their phones, right? And it brought up an issue for me, which is an extension of technology, but it's how do we get our identity these days? And a lot of people were really reluctant to switch their phones off because their phones are their access to their lives, right? And asking somebody to switch that off is quite a big thing. Now, we could argue the case in this for a long time and might come up in the end and go, well, we should just get people to switch off their phones. But to me, there's a bigger thing there about what is happening to identity that we as coaches need to be aware of. And that leaves me to one other thing on the professional side. So John Whitmore, who was obviously a very important person in the whole development of executive coaching, particularly in the UK and Europe, but he had a global reach. One of the things about being the chair of the Association for Coaching in Ireland as part of in the early days, and I hope it's still the same, was you could phone anybody and say, look, would you come along and address one of our regular gatherings? And nobody ever said no to me. Nancy Klein said, yeah, just tell me when. So John said, of course I will. He'd been in the business a long time. And the expectation, he was asked to come and talk about the skills of coaching and what it means to be a coach. And he spent the whole time talking about the state of the world, right? And I could see people being quite confused by it. And I asked him afterwards and said, John, why did you do that? And he said, well, it's what interests me at the moment, but also we as coaches have got to continually widen our understanding of the world. Because if we have a narrow view of it, we will restrict the engagement. So I think there's all sorts of things about the way the world is moving that we have a responsibility to. And one last point for me is, and it's something that goes back a long way for me, is the essence to me of coaching, as I said earlier, is holding the space open and not contaminating it with my advice, my views, not leading people in certain ways or whatever. I have supervised in my career lots and lots of people. I am still worried that there are many people who are coaches who are not able to do the basics of it well, right? And I think as guardians, we need to be very careful of that and go, there are certain abilities that coaches need. And if they don't have those abilities, we need to be careful about whether they should actually be doing the job and calling themselves coaches. I'm very happy in my practice. When I was a coaching practice, I was a coach, a facilitator, and a teacher. So I was quite happy to separate them out. But when the coaching bit it was coaching. It wasn't a mixture of the others. So I think that to me is an ongoing challenge.
I'd love to build on that, Oliver. A lot of what you said there really, really resonated for me and took me right back to the value of the AC's accreditation process. Because I completely agree with you. The world is more complex. And if coaches are to be equipped to coach in this complex world, especially inside organisations where leaders are facing challenges they've not faced before, the coaches themselves have to be aware and very capable and self-aware and so on as well. And I think one of the things that the AC's accreditation process does particularly well is require the coach to go through a very deep critical reflection on their work. And I think that's where a purely competence-based approach is not something I am in favour of, because I think you can demonstrate competencies and you can do that over and over again over years and years and years, but it doesn't actually mean that you're getting better or that you are becoming, fit for a more complex world. So I think that's one of the reasons that the AC accreditation process is so rigorous and really valuable as a learning experience for coaches. I know just when I went through it myself, I found it, I got insights, I learned things, I became more aware of it just by going through that process.
Yeah, and I just want to build on that too. Earlier I said, the two organizations that are here in North America, ICF and AC, have similar core competencies. What distinguishes the AC in executive coaching is that they have additional competencies. So where are you as a leader? Where are you relative to systems and stakeholders, etc.? So it really does make you reflect on what aspects of coaching need to be brought into the conversation beyond just a narrow bandwidth, perhaps, in a way that allows both the practitioner and the client to grow, to learn. It is essentially a learning activity. A good coaching session will leave with the client learning about themselves and the way they approach situations, and also who they are becoming. And in that sense, AI will definitely have a role to play here. I've seen constellation-type coaching through avatars online. I've heard now of AI analyzing people, the way they're speaking, and coming up with their own next question. I think that's all valid. I think it's all part and parcel with the way the world's going. That being said, I also, I personally, would I want to have an AI doctor, or would I want to meet a human doctor? I think there's a balance there to be had. I may do the initial one through AI to determine what symptoms I have and what causes them. But at the end of the day, I think we do want to meet and discuss something with a human. I know my doctor I would go for my annual checkup, and she would take an extra 20 minutes to actually talk about my lifestyle. I mean, that was extraordinary. And I felt valued. I felt heard. I felt more conscious of just how I was living, as opposed to just treating a symptom or being treated like just a number. So I think the relational part of coaching is one of the key points that makes it such a dynamic and enriching experience for a lot of people. It is a partnership, and the two of you are having that dialogic process that's becoming something more as it evolves over time. And that has to spill into the workforce too. People who have gone through the programs have talked about how they didn't expect their personal lives to have been so impacted. And when I ask them, they say, how? They say, well, people have come up to me now and say, you're much more patient with me. You're actually listening at a different level. You're actually asking me questions that don't put me on the defensive, but actually invite me into exploring more. And so this coach-like approach is starting to ripple out. And in that sense, that's where the value of having a one-on-one coach or even a group coaching session, which is a different skill set from team coaching. I'm certified in both. The idea of still personal connection. Now, as we've experienced in the last couple of years because of the pandemic, we're forced to go online. And that has created still an intimate experience. When I first started coaching, 90% of my coaching was done by phone. And then it kind of flipped to in-person, and now it flipped to a combination of audio-visual like we're doing today. And so there is that intimacy that can still come with that. You're forced to look at the screen when you're coaching and being with a client and noticing their behavior. In the same way, when you were on the phone, it's a highly visual medium. It sounds counterintuitive, but when you're on the phone, you're listening to a change of breath, you're listening to an intonation, and you're imagining, and so you're questioning. So all these different technologies have played a part in evolving our ability to hone in and develop our coaching acumen at so many different nuanced layers. That's absolutely remarkable. Just when I think I've got coaching, I think I'm doing well as a coach, I realize there's just so much more to learn. And that's what makes it fascinating. And this is why and like any other coach will tell you, once you've got that bug of learning and growing, and it's an endless journey that's so exciting and wondrous that you just want to share that with your clients and hope that they can step up and step into their own new way of being and doing.
That's wonderful. Thank you for sharing your enthusiasm there, Michael, which leads me neatly towards the close of our conversation today and thinking about the future. And maybe if I can just stick with you first, Michael, and get some further thoughts from you in terms of what is it that you're excited about? What are you looking forward to in coaching from this point forward?
I'm really excited about an emerging trend, which is youth coaching and coaching at a younger age. Mary Gordon here in Canada started a program called Roots of Empathy that she expanded down to Seeds of Empathy. And this idea of self-awareness and why we're young people at this point experiencing their frustration and anger or excitement or whatever was going on in a way that they could start self-diagnosing, but also checking in with others. What is it that you're noticing in me? And being open to that feedback and feed forward, as Marshall Goldsmith would call it, in the sense of what can we do with this going forward? Again, it's so who you are now. Coaches, we look at clients as this is your current circumstance. Who is it that you are becoming, and what is it you want to accomplish, and to what end and impact? We need to bring other people into those conversations. Who else would be impacted if you were to do that? And what about your inner circle, etc.? So by extending that down now into schools, so recently I was invited back to my former high school to talk about coaching, and they were very excited about that. It's beyond career counseling. It's actually starting to ripple into the education field. Certainly we've seen that in universities, but we're now seeing that now with more youth coaching initiatives coming into play, working with nonprofits. Here in Canada, Lily Sato started a program for coaching with Indigenous peoples who have suffered greatly. And so the sense of empowerment, coaching is all about empowerment, not enabling, but empowering people to take on more self-agency, self-direction, self-authorship, etc., in a way that boosts their hope and desire to be more and to contribute more and to collaborate more ultimately with other people.
Thanks, Michael. Before I jump to you, Sarah, Oliver, what are you excited about in terms of where coaching is going?
I think, first of all, where my coaching is going, because I think my view of coaching and where the world needs to go with coaching is connected to where I go with coaching. And that wonderful thing which I mentioned before of continuing to, even though I'm 70, even though I'm restricted now in the focus of what I do, although still every bit as enthusiastic, I've learned, for example, 2 things recently which were just great for me, and they're tiny little micro skill things. The first one was a good friend of mine who's a wonderful coach, Ray Lamb. We were talking about being in the room with someone and coaching, and he said one of the things he has started to do is if he's sitting opposite the person, or say when they come to talk about the future, he asks that they both sit and face forward. So they sit side by side and say, so it models that sense of we are looking together at the future, not we're looking at each other. And it just really tickled me as an idea. Okay. And the second one was it was when I was doing some work in Russia, and we were doing, that thing about where do coaches find the right questions to ask, and and then you drill into that and you realize it's really complicated. One of the people who was doing it said, I think, and so he had got stuck. And somebody else said, why don't you just ask the person you're coaching, what should I ask you next? And it just struck me as being a brilliantly clever question for all the reasons of power and relationship and whatever else. So I just love the future emerging in my own practice of those little things and big things. I think looking to the wider world of coaching and how it fits in, I know from my own career that all the other tools and techniques that I have used in the whole sort of learning and development framework, if I can call it that, have limitations to them in the fact that if you design a learning program, there will be some people it doesn't suit and whatever else will go wrong or whatever. Coaching is the thing that consistently for me works. And as long as you get the contracting right at the start and set it up appropriately, it will never go wrong. It might fail to reach the expectations for what the person thought, but it won't go wrong. So it's a wonderfully, for me, safe activity when we stick to the right, the best ways of doing it. And therefore my fascination is, where will it go as the world changes? I mean, maybe other people are different. But it seems to me we're going into a very difficult period for the world. Well, we're already in it. And just letting coaching find its place in that as the part of helping us to get to where I suspect we all went to is the sort of future we want to create. So it's I'm playing a part in that, but I actually don't know what that part will be.
Yeah, and to AC's credit, they're innovating new programs. They're tapped into what is going on. I just finished an incredibly wonderful 8-part series by Dr. Ashley McClellan called Compassionate Coaching. So this is beyond empathy. This is an orientation to what is needed here to be inspired and incorporated, really into the body in that sense. The sense of loving kindness and what will that open up for people if we were able to step into that realm? How as we as coaches can step beyond our performance orientation and step into our being and being compassionate, beyond sympathy, beyond empathy, in a way that creates that trust and safety psychologically, emotionally, etc., and to work with those in a confidential setting. Another great aspect of coaching is that everything is confidential. And so this sense of commitment to others and their well-being and well-doing is something that the AC just embraces and runs with all these innovative coaching programs, signature series, webinars, online resources, etc. So it's just an absolutely wonderful organization that keeps on growing by leaps and bounds.
Thanks, Michael. That's great. Lovely to hear. Sarah?
I'm excited to see the emergence and growth of more and more global voices representing the huge diversity that we have in the coaching community, but also in the community of clients that we coach and work with. Noticeable, for example, even in this podcast, the kind of elders of the coaching field that we name check are not widely representative of that diversity in that community. And what is, I think, very exciting to see in both research and practice and thought leadership is very much more of a broadening of the voices that are coming through. And I think that's very important for us, but very exciting to see as well. I'm also really excited about the part that we AC play in coaching in the world, and that we individually in our contributions through the AC or as members of the AC are playing in really enabling people to go out there and use coaching for all of the benefits that Oliver and Michael particularly have spoken about on this podcast. And we have a contribution to make to enabling people to do that work in a very, very high standard, professional, ethical way that acknowledges how difficult it is. It acknowledges the complexities that we face and offers coaches different ways to support themselves in keeping fit for doing that work in that complex world. And that excites me to be part of that, group of people who are contributing in whatever way to making that happen.
That's wonderful. Well, thank you all for your time today. We've had a very rich and fascinating conversation from where I've been sitting, talking about the importance of human connection and contribution there, and reflecting on how far coaching has come in the last 20 years, but also where it's going and some of the challenges and things that we need to be thinking about today. So I hope you've enjoyed listening to our conversation today. Before we wrap up, our listeners could be in your region. They might be in a different region, but eager to connect with you. So I'd love to invite each of you to share with our listener where they can reach out and connect with you.
Absolutely. Please, the easiest, best way to connect with me is to look me up on LinkedIn, Michael Cullen Coaching. If you put in those words, my profile will pop up, and I'd be happy to accept your invitation or message, etc., and we can carry on from there. Otherwise, you'll find me at the University of Toronto, of course, at the Rotman School of Business, doing the Rotman Executive Coaching Certificate Program, and you can reach me through them too. And my address is michael@associationforcoaching.com.
Okay, so give me my email, and that's oliver@oliverjohnston.net. Get me on LinkedIn, just put Oliver Johnston Coach, and you'll get me. And also there's my website for the Stepping Out practice, which is stepping-out.co.uk.
Yep, you will find me also on LinkedIn. Happy to connect with you there. If you're a member of AC, I'm also on the AC Connect platform. I suspect others are too. So you can find me there. My AC email address is sarahT@associationforcoaching.com. Happy to connect with you. It's always great to meet new people.
That's great. And we'll put all of those links into the show notes, which you'll be able to find on the associationforcoaching.com website. Thank you all for joining me today.
Absolute pleasure. Thank you, Sarah.
It's been a pleasure.
Thanks, Rob.
Thanks for listening to another podcast by the Association for Coaching. I'm Rob Lawrence. For 20 years, the AC's purpose has been to inspire and champion coaching excellence, advance the coaching profession, and make a sustainable difference to individuals, organisations, and societies worldwide. To find out more about the Association for Coaching and our member benefits, follow us on LinkedIn or explore our website at associationforcoaching.com. You can keep up to date with our latest podcast episodes, enjoy the wealth of digital learning offerings, and gain insights from our Coaching Perspectives magazine.